Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. Today, Friday, April 22nd, 2022, our 102nd episode. There was a lot of twos in that today. If you're with us today, thank you so much. It's a beautiful sunny day out here in Southeast Michigan. So, true dedication there. We appreciate having you with us today. We're going back to our early stage funding series today. 2 weeks ago, our last participant on that, Dale Grogan, was talking to us all about angel investing. We had a wonderful time with him here in the studio. After we have the presentation today, we'll have time for Q&A. Joining me today will be Prem Bodogala, who is with Michigan Rise and Red Cedar Ventures out of Michigan State University. That's where they're located. Here's one more slide on the series that we're in right now, talking all about early stage funding. And we'll be doing that again next week with Patty Glaza from Invest Detroit. Before we get to the main event, though, just a few dates to have in mind. MGCS, now the Midwest Growth Capital Symposium, coming up. It's still online this year, May 17th and 18th, 2022, but that's coming up quickly. We'll be involved in that and looking forward to it. Also, the Michigan Medical Device Summit is happening again in person, Kalamazoo, Michigan, September 20th, 2022. Keep an eye out for that by MishBio. And the Capital Days, April 29th and May 6th. Those will be a virtual event. Point your camera at that screen, grab that barcode if you want to sign up for Capital Days. Well, with those announcements out of the way, I want to welcome our guest today. Prem Bodagala is with Michigan Rise and Red Cedar Ventures. He's the director there. And Prem, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Gene, for having me back. I guess we didn't do too badly the first time around for welcoming us back. It's been about, I think, a year and a half since our first visit here.
It's amazing. It feels like 6 months ago. And you and Jeff Wesley were on episode 33, and you and I were just chatting before the show saying that we're pretty sure that's about when Michigan Rise launched.
Exactly. We launched in late August 2020. So I think it'd be nice today to kind of talk a little bit about what we have done since that first episode. We have a nice little track record I'd like to share more about.
Yeah, that's really awesome. We're going to bring up some of your slides here in a minute to talk us through what Michigan Rise is all about and the kinds of things that you're involved in. You've got lots of great metrics for us. But before that, I think the question that I always like to ask people, by the time you get good at what you're doing in this community, you've been around for a while, you've seen a lot, and then it always begs the question, what makes you crazy enough to come back for another round in the ring? And so maybe as we're bringing up these slides, you can tell us just a bit about your background, Prem, and what brought you to the point that you're at today.
Absolutely. So I guess I'll start with why I came to Michigan. I came to the Mitten State for school and never really left after that. All my senior education has been done here. So the guest we had last show, Dale Grogan, was actually one of my earliest mentors in venture capital. That's when about a decade ago, I worked at Michigan Accelerator Fund 1, which was life sciences focused venture fund. And that's when the bug bit. And really just being in the weeds with startup founders and helping them kind of, solve the puzzle, making things less hairy and kind of building value, I think is something that excites me a lot. I joke sometimes that both founders and the earliest stages of investing, I think we have to be a little bit masochistic to kind of enjoy the work we do, but I think we derive a lot of pleasure in it as well. So since that role, I think I have pretty much stayed in early stage investing. I have kind of branched out to sector agnostic investing now. Versus life sciences is still a big part of our portfolio, but we invest in a sector agnostic fashion at Michigan Rise and Red Cedar Ventures.
Yeah, it's really cool what you're doing. And I think one of the things that's impressed me, just in terms of even being able to do a series on early stage investing in the state of Michigan, which is separate from later stage, which we'll be talking about later in the year. There's a lot of people to talk to, each playing a really unique role. Of course, this new Rise Fund, really central and a bigger thing once you're getting out of those very, very early stages. Some amazing resources you can bring to bear. But we do have this growing community, and it's doing things, and it's really fun to be able to look at it and to see all the nuance. And okay, well, you should talk to that person, and then you go to this person, and there's really a
Yeah.
flow there.
There is. I think, when I started about a decade ago, there were really only like a few core, sectors that we had activity around, right? But now we are seeing um, that profusion of deal flow in several sectors, right? Like space tech wasn't really a thing about 10 years ago. Now we have several companies in that space, especially in the northern part of Michigan. Some of the largest funding rounds in the past 12 months have been in that arena. No, I think it's a great time, and it's great to kind of see people who were senior leaders at some big successes like StockX, like Duo Security, go on to start their own companies, right? And we are seeing a lot of those opportunities in our deal flow as well. And it's been a privilege to kind of invest in those founders. It's a microcosm of what happens on the coast, but it's good to see that happening. Obviously, you have folks like Jen Baird, who was on the show I think a couple episodes ago, and she's done that several times over. So it's great to kind of see that it kind of speaks to the maturation of our ecosystem. Not as much as the coast, but it's still good to see nevertheless.
Yeah, it's really fun when you see at least those nascent elements of those things. I feel like 10, 15 years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, but you wouldn't have been able to say, oh, well, we see each of those elements here. And now it's a matter of growing them, but it's not a
Yep,
matter of saying, are they even here? They really
exactly.
are.
Exactly. Yep, you're right.
Yeah, it's very
Absolutely.
cool. Well, take us through about Michigan Rise. We have a bit of a presentation from you here. I want people to understand what the fund is about, some of the cool metrics that you've put together, and then, yeah, like you said, walk us through what's changed since I think we said it was October 30th of 2020 when you were last on the show. We'll bring this presentation up.
Thank you. All right, so maybe I'll start by saying that Michigan Rise is a early stage focused sector agnostic investment fund that is backed by Michigan State University Foundation and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. We are a wholly owned subsidiary of the foundation, and we are here to not just invest in startups, but also support the founders with support, with access to our partners in the ecosystem. And I'll talk a little bit more about that vis-a-vis healthcare sector that we have partnered with through the foundation, but kind of provide a value-added support beyond just capital. And these are, some of the areas of our investment focus. And no surprise there. I mean, these are some of our core Michigan industries, both historical, but also the new up and coming ones. Next slide. Well, if I can maybe look at the metrics here a little closely. Talk kind of broadly about our portfolio, the areas that we have focused. A third of our companies are in IT. A third of them are in life sciences. I think the numbers may look a little bit off here, but in the IT, we do have a lot of life sciences or healthcare-focused IT companies, and a third is everything else. We have been very, very active since launching in August of 2020, invested in 36 companies across 48 investments. Really excited to be on the verge of our 50th investment here shortly, and really proud of the work our team has done in supporting those many companies and deploying capital. And also these companies have gone on to raise follow-on funding in a pretty impressive way. So our leverage numbers are also pretty exciting for us that our companies have been able to use the resources we provided to then go on to raise larger rounds downstream. On the right, just a few of the healthcare-focused companies in our portfolio, a combination of med device as well as therapeutics companies there. Next slide, please. And just a bit more breakdown of how we've invested across the sectors. And that number, life sciences and information technology. The information technology, there's a subset of health IT there. So that's where I say it's about a third in life sciences or healthcare, and a third in information technology, and a third in everything else. Next slide, please. And just wanted to also kind of give some detail on how or what we are seeing and how we are deploying our capital in the early stage opportunities across Michigan. As you'll see, most of our investments are done in convertible securities. I think that's just the nature of where we come in, where we engage with our companies. And then happy to say that several of those investments have then gone on to get converted in price rounds, in which we follow on as well. And they have been, some of them have been pretty impressive up rounds, which kind of speaks to that table on the right. Valuations, I think we are seeing go up. That is, across the board, whoever I speak with, both within Michigan and across the country. On the convertible side, pre and post, 7 pre and pre-money cap and 10 post-money cap. This is definitely, I think, a few million higher than what we used to see maybe 3-4 years ago, and the same on the price rounds. Our average investment, first check is about $125,000. We invest up to $250,000 per company, and we reserve some dry powder for some follow-on funding as well. And just a little more breakdown on how we have dispersed the $5.6 million to date in those 36 portfolio companies. Next slide, please. And one of the things that we've been very, very intentional from the outset is supporting underserved founders. This is a number that we are very, very proud of, and we're very intentional about working with underserved teams. And what do we mean by underserved? It is, yes, minority, BIPOC founders, female founders, LGBTQ community, but also we look at geographically underserved founders. Capital is not, even within Michigan, Michigan doesn't have as much capital as the coast, but even within Michigan, there are certain regions that see less investment than others. And so we identify some of those places in the UP, for example, and we're intentional about working with them. And so this is a dashboard that we monitor internally that we are very proud of as well. Next slide, please. Just a timeline from when we launched. So August 10th is when we launched, and want to give a big shout out to our entire team that has worked with all the entrepreneurs across the state. We have finite resources, right? Capital is finite, time is finite, but having worked to invest in 36 companies to date in about a year and a half or so. And then I think by the end of June this year, we're probably going to be at about 45 companies at least. And so that gives us the whole team a lot of pride. And I think, we are at about a 10% investment rate. That's a little bit higher than what typical early stage funds do. When I was working with a later stage, let's say, Series A, Series B type of fund, we used to invest in about 1 to 2% of all the pipeline that we saw, and we are at about 10%. And so really, really grateful for the resources that the MSU Foundation have provided our team to be able to do that.
That's an impressive number, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And just a snapshot, this is our entire team. Without these folks, it'd be very difficult to kind of do the work we do day in, day out. So really grateful for their tireless efforts to serve our startup ecosystem.
That's awesome, Prem. It's interesting. We were gonna go next to talk about sort of the spectrum of the types of investments that you make. But as you were going through that, one slide in particular stuck out to me, and it's something that's been sort of on my mind as we move through these types of discussions. But it's these you've got these the healthcare portfolio companies here, and then I think up above, which is the one I was thinking of, you've sort of got these investments by sector down here. And and I know Jeff Reinveldt's one of our advisors, and we're talking about doing some VC shows later in the year to talk about differences between areas of investment. And since you put it up here, and I apologize we didn't talk about this before, I think it'd be really interesting for our audience to hear a little bit, since you are sector agnostic, you invest in all sorts of things, and you invest in sort of where our focus is here with the show on be they therapeutics, be they devices, digital health. We see the investment numbers there, but is there anything high level you can tell us about trends or what investing in different areas is like? And if you sort of compare the med tech and therapeutic and digital health world versus be it transportation or IT or whatever else. Any high level insights you can give us?
Yeah, I think the point at which we engage with life sciences companies is typically earlier, right? I mean, naturally, we with an IT company, maybe we want to see a few customers and some revenue, which obviously doesn't translate to med device and therapeutics companies. We want to see on the IT side, like maybe an MVP, maybe some early customers, or early demonstration of kind of like a product market fit. We don't want to completely have a fully fleshed product market fit, but to see some evidence of it. Whereas I think just naturally in life sciences, the point at which investors like ourselves will get engaged is, if they have some animal studies, they still need a lot of capital, right? And so working with several other, like we want to probably see a much larger runway, for life sciences companies, and so raise a larger round to be able to kind of hit those milestones, right? The preclinical milestones for them to then go raise maybe a Series A, whereas maybe an earlier round for an IT company is not going to be that large. Like maybe $1 million would do, versus maybe for a therapeutics company, they would need to raise at least like 3 to 5 million to get to that preclinical data. So I think that's probably one way to kind of look at the differences between kind of life sciences, healthcare, which is the focus of your website and the programs you work with, versus healthcare companies.
Does that create any kind of maturity disparities in terms of the types of companies you work with? I think it makes sense that you'd want to get involved earlier with some of the health tech companies. Does that mean though that you can sort of wait longer on the non-health tech ones to get a more mature opportunity? Is there inherently more risk? I mean, yes, you've got to get involved early with the health tech ones, but is there then inherently more risk with that than getting to sit on the sidelines a little longer?
There is a bit more risk on the healthcare side, because sometimes oftentimes it's binary, right? You have poor animal data, or the results working with the CRO, they're not repeatable or replicable than what was done in the lab. It does create that extra risk, but I think that's just the nature of the game. And it's not that we wait too long on the IT side, for example, because if we did, then they wouldn't need our money, right? And they can always get funding from a venture fund that does late seed or Series A. We still engage earlier with those companies, but for example, we've kind of pushed back on, or it's not so common that you invest in idea stages companies on the IT side anymore, unless it's a founder that has kind of hit it out of the park. And he wants to get that startup capital to launch a company. I think even early stage investors are looking for an MVP, a little bit of demonstration of a market need compared to the life sciences.
Yeah, that makes sense. And sorry to put you on the spot there on that one, but I think that's a
Yeah,
very
that's fine.
interesting thing because you guys get to see so many
Yeah,
different things and you're able to compare and contrast that a little bit. Well, we're in a series here about early stage funding, right? And we've been talking to like Dale was talking about angel, and of course they do some VC on the other side,
yeah,
which may come back later to talk about. But we've talked to MEDC resources, university led resources. You're outside of those necessities, right? It's not like you can only look at something coming out from a particular academic area, which is great.
right.
But tell us what type of companies you typically see. Where are they? Who have they been to before? Who are they? Where are they in the process that they're coming to you now? Who will they be targeting after going to a Rise or Red Cedar Ventures?
Absolutely. So, given the fact that um, we are sector agnostic, and our pipeline is also pretty diverse, right? Universities, tech transfer offices are a big source of our pipeline. Other co-investors, like Grand Angels, Dale's organization, and our smart zones across the state.
Mm.
Other MEDC supported entities, entrepreneurial support organizations, venture funds. These are all kind of sources of deal flow. I think, having said that, there's very few early stage focused or few sources of diluted capital for early stage, and so I think we all kind of know each other. We share deals with each other, and so that's a good source of deal flow for us. And we also have a website where we intake applications, and so there is another way for companies to reach out to us. But I think having a warm introduction by folks that we work with, we connect with on a regular basis, I think is also a great way to connect with us. And in terms of where after us, and I think we're definitely the companies that we are working with, we invest in. These are still very, very early for venture capital funds. The fact that we invest in convertible securities for the most part, I think, is an indication of that. These are companies that have promise, but I think either themselves or the VC funds, don't want to price them just yet. So they need some assistance. And it's not that our fund, we only can invest $250,000 max per company. So that's not usually enough to fill out a round. But I think the value that we bring in as an investor, given that we work with, the Michigan State University Foundation and its and our sister subsidiaries, which work a lot with health systems across the state. I think there's some value we bring to healthcare companies that way. For example, we work with our sister subsidiary, Spartan Innovations, works with Henry Ford Health, Spectrum Health, Trinity on the west side, Mary Free Bed, et cetera. And so they can be sources of pipeline of deal flow for us. And companies want to work with us and get investment from us because being part of our portfolio means that they will then have access to the network we bring through those relationships from the MSU Foundation. That's a long way to kind of answer your question. I don't know if that kind of answered what you're looking for, but happy to give more detail on.
I think it does. You're in that position where you're sort of you're the next real available thing that's beyond sort of that angel or early stage academic funding. But you're saying you're not able to bring millions and millions of dollars to the table. There's a limitation on what you can bring. So then the necessity to syndicate or find other ways to fill out a round it's there, and it's important. It's something that they have to think about with you.
Absolutely. And I think if we can be a catalyst for a company to raise a post friends and family round, but pre VC round, right? And so sometimes what we can do is, given that we most times we need a match from a company, from other investors. So we will do our diligence, give company a commitment, because the company may need to raise minimum $1 million, right? We can probably fund 150 of that, but we could say, hey, look, we can give you a commitment. We can then leverage that commitment to raise capital from around the state. We will share our diligence with our partners around the state. So that's another way for the company to kind of hit the ground running. So other investors don't have to start from scratch. And also there's some validation that comes, right, when the diligence that we have done. The other thing I wanted to kind of mention is, unlike some of my previous experiences in venture capital, we as a smaller fund have the benefit of a bench strength of subject matter expert through our sister subsidiary, which is Spartan Innovation. So we can reach out to our network, through the LP relationship that MSU Foundation has in venture funds in Michigan and across the country. So that helps us put a good diligence packet together, and that is also valuable for companies seeking investment from us as they syndicate the deal for with other early stage investors.
That's really cool. I love the kinds of synergies that are emerging the more time goes on, and people are finding those teams that they can work with, so they're not so siloed all by themselves somewhere out there trying to make decisions. What you said about being able to catalyze a round, I think it's very, very fascinating, because oftentimes folks don't know. I mean, after a friends and family round, right? To be honest, I think that's what you said. To be able to have somebody you can go to and say, yeah, look, I know you might not be able to put $1 in until I find that other dollar, but by pre-committing, can you help me find that other dollar? That's pretty powerful.
It is. It can be a multiplier effect for sure.
Yeah, that's really neat. You mentioned is that a public website that we should make people aware of, that they can have access to? We'll certainly put it up on the screen here if we want to get that into the world.
Absolutely, it's MichiganRise.com. Has an application in there, a link to submit information about the company, and some metrics about our investment activity, etc.
And there it is up on the shared screen there, MichiganRise.com. Take out that capital M that I got in there inadvertently. That's great. So that's one way. That's one way in through the door. I'm imagining that warm introductions are a great thing too. You've got a network, and if people can find their way in through that, that's got to be a good thing.
Absolutely.
Well, somebody wants to know. Here we are. We've done our friends and family. We've done our academic funding. Maybe got some M-Track funding or something like that. And here we are, we're out, we're in a startup. We're not quite ready to raise maybe tons of VC money yet. We're still in between. We've gotten into contact. We're talking with you guys and your team. What does this process look like? We've talked up to this point, in the series about things like there's various either local or state monies that are available through smart zones, for example. And one of the things that really strikes me about that is oftentimes that first dollar is I'm not to diminish it. It is a relatively low bar in an appropriate way. Then there's a lot of scrutiny as to whether the second dollar comes, because if you couldn't make good on that first one, you're probably not going to get the second one. There's some pretty good scrutiny there. We were talking about angels and how angels are banding together these days, and boy, now if you show it to an angel network, you got a great chance, because a lot of people will see it, and at the same time, if you bomb, a lot of people are going to see it. What does it feel like to come in and pitch to Rise? What is that like? What are the timelines? What sorts of focus areas or questions are you going to most likely be bringing out to these folks? Sure. What does it feel like?
So I think we get our pipeline is at different stages of cookingness, or is that a word even? Did I make it up? Of being kind of, baked in terms of around, right? So sometimes, we may be the first entity that, a company, say in the in the healthcare space, right? Given that we are on this forum here, I think we will have some technical diligence that we would need to do, and that's where I think our investment team is really blessed to have subject matter experts, both on the investment team front, but as also our colleagues at our sister subsidiaries that can help us vet those opportunities, right? So there's a technical diligence. Then obviously we want to assess, the business side of things. We want to see if how the company is set up, right? So is this a Michigan entity? How are the founders kind of incentivized? Are all the formation documents in place? Those are the kind of diligence items we go through, and then we write up an investment memo, which once it's approved by our investment committee, we can then use it. If a company doesn't yet have that minimum close identified, we can kind of share that information to trusted, co-investment partners, across the state. That's what I kind of alluded to prior. But that's kind of typically the process. And not all companies, obviously, like 90% of the companies don't go through that process, right? So when we talk to a company and they don't kind of meet our pass the hurdle that we have for an investment, we provide some feedback to them, right? And say, look, you guys need to kind of work on these gaps that we would feel more comfortable if you've kind of addressed those. And so it's never a no, thank you, goodbye, but it's always kind of give some feedback and please come meet us again when those areas have been addressed. And so that's the kind of approach. And obviously, this process can vary based on sector. It can vary on how organized the company is with their documentation. And oftentimes, early stage companies, then it is not organized, right? So we can actually help with that. I think we have a process, a data room that we set up on kind of getting some diligence information. So even if you don't invest, I think going through that process can help the company set up for raising capital down the road.
It sounds like you still see yourself as part of that formation and education process, even though that's certainly not the reason you're there. But it's you're still. Oftentimes, we'll hear from folks that they didn't get any feedback from a VC. The door just got shut, and there was no more information, and they didn't owe them anymore. But it sounds like you're still trying to get them off the training wheels, but you're willing to have those conversations.
Exactly, and I think if we cannot invest in them, we can always provide the feedback on what would make them investable, but also direct them to our other partners in the ecosystem who exist purely or mostly because to kind of help companies fill those gaps, right? And so if they need some resources to get their SOC compliance done or something like that, and so there's a BAF opportunity that exists. So directing them to those resources, and sometimes it is still it comes as a surprise that companies don't know of those resources. So they're appreciative of it, and hopefully that will help them kind of hit those milestones that will then make them investable from our investment thesis perspective.
Yeah, that's really cool, and cool that you're doing that. One question on the funding levels. It sounded like you said your smallest was 150 up to 250. That was the range.
Yep.
But you said that's
average is about 125. We've invested as low as 100,000 as well. So
okay, so down 100,000 then up. But then you're doing that generally as a match to some other thing. So the real funding round would be double that, whatever those numbers are.
That's right. And in cases of, there are certain sectors where it's sometimes there's a lot of non-dilutive capital, right? So in cases of a university, tech transfer company, and we have a lot of those in our portfolio. We're actually very intentional about working with university spinouts because those are those are the fires, right, that keep burning the engines of innovation. So, and it's sometimes unrealistic for those companies to raise dilutive capital. So if they have grant funding, we can kind of use that as a match as well for our investment.
Got it. We have a question here from John, and John asks, thanks to the work of Rise, Red Cedar, and other funds, there are now some great early stage options in the regional ecosystem. But he asks, as companies move to, and this I think is part of this whole question of flow, right? Like, where are people coming from? Where are they heading to? What do they receive when they come through you?
Yeah.
He asks, as companies move to later rounds, what have been the most fruitful strategies or examples to help connect portfolio companies to larger downstream VC rounds, coastal capital, especially for life science companies, which, as you mentioned, need significant capital for A and B rounds. So we talked about how they come to you and lead-ins, but what do you see as effective strategies for sort of next steps after you?
Absolutely. I think let's stay on the topic of life sciences companies. I think companies to be working with, and we have a few companies in our portfolio that have done this, working with corporate VC arms, from the earlier on, even though they may not invest, but being on their radar. We ourselves leverage our LP relationship through the MSC Foundation and several life sciences focused venture funds. We have an excellent ecosystem partner in Renaissance Fund of Funds, which organizes undemo days. This year they're doing two of those, and they have a fantastic event where they invite VCs from across the country to meet with Michigan companies. So these are some of the ways I think both we help companies identify downstream funding, but also I think the companies can be, even though they're not maybe seeking investment earlier on, they can be on the radar of some major corporate VCs who could come in some future rounds.
Yeah, very cool. Good answer. Yeah. Also, as John led out there, if you have any questions, if you're listening today, feel free to either raise a hand, type it into the Q&A, type it into the chat. We'd love to get those to Prem. Get him while he's hot. He's here. He's got the answers for you. Well, I want to go to this the lessons learned the hard way. Right. One of the things that I often like to ask folks on the show is, what's the message you wish you could communicate that you have to tell over and over and over again? We're going to go from there into what are some of the best and worst case examples you've seen of teams coming to you. But Is there any sort of overarching lessons that you kind of wish you could just tell everybody in the world before they step through your doors?
Yeah, I think, and this is probably a culmination, or it's an ongoing learning, but I think we kind of lessons learned as investors, right? I think when companies or teams approach you for an investment, and then you learn that they are involved with 3 or 4 other startups. Is it impossible? Maybe not, but also I think it does create a lot of challenges, right? And doing one startup is hard enough, right? And often, sometimes in the early stages, you're kind of holding a job, like a full-time job, and then working on the startup, and in the off hours. But then to do like maybe 2 or 3 of those, I think it's a recipe that is not geared for success, right? So I think that's one of the things. And the other one is, sometimes, founders, ask for NDAs, or, they kind of maybe think that it's the idea, right? They have this great idea and they don't want to talk about it. And, before signing the NDA, but, it's not really about the idea, it's the execution of the idea, right? And as an early stage investor that looks at, and our deal flow is ever increasing, right? So we may look at 500 deals this year. So we're not in a position to sign NDAs, right? And it just makes our job very, very hard. So I think those are some of the things I think it's kind of challenging, right, as investors for us to do that companies sometimes expect.
Yeah, it's worth knowing though, right? Because it's very normal and expected that you're going to
Yeah.
sign an NDA when you have a discussion about the
Yeah.
technology. In our business, it's a big thing, right? Because if we're going to get into the details, people want to know that their IP is
Yep.
protected. But that's actually a very common thing. It's not unique to you guys. It's a very common thing among investors. Is you've got such a huge deal flow that if they start knocking on your door and saying, "Well, we need you to sign an NDA," they're I mean, am I putting words in your mouth to say they're probably not going to
Yeah, yeah,
get a call back?
it makes it. Yeah, exactly. I think it kind of becomes like a bottleneck, right? And
Yeah.
we have, trusted, advisors, in our network that we want to consult with. Like, there's maybe, and then kind of the requirement of an NDA just kind of makes that the process more challenging.
Yeah, no, it's worth knowing. Well, what are some of the things that you've seen? Can you have any case studies or examples, especially in life sciences, that you'd like to share with us? Maybe some stunning examples of wow, this is exactly the way it should work, and maybe some where it's like this is what we're trying to never repeat again as long as we live.
Let's see. So, I mean, I think I'll give you broadly, right? Not just maybe life sciences, but I can give you an example of a company that we invested in when we just launched the fund. Um, Great, founders, first-time founders, um, came with some relevant backgrounds, but this was their first time doing a startup. They put their MVP together, paper clips and rubber bands. This was by no means a finished product, right? But they demonstrated value to their customers through some early deal or early clients. Some of their clients actually invested in the company, which is always great to see, right? Kind
Mm,
of shows the validation, and then the terms were reasonable. They were nothing crazy because they had recognized that they needed that early capital to get to that next point, and they were not kind of they weren't expecting like a 20 million valuation, right, for this great idea, but they recognized that this was still an idea that needed to be executed on. So I think, if I recall, it was like a $3.5 million, pre-money round, and I think they may have raised like $1 million or something like that. And so they knocked it out of the park, right, with that money. And then they just had a Series B round a few months ago, with investments from several marquee investors, across the country. So I think that's a very good example. Maybe in the earliest stages, sometimes when you kind of become too concerned about valuation, yes, you may have like 95% of a company that it may be not worth as much, but it's better to kind of have 20% of a company that's worth $100 million versus the other way around. So
it does seem oftentimes some of the best things are when a business transaction is going to happen, and everyone just kind of looks at it and goes, "Yeah, that's reasonable. Like it's good for us, it's good for you. No one's
yeah,
reaching for too much." It's when, "Oh, this is the greatest thing since sliced." Well, we haven't proven that yet, you know.
yeah.
It
And,
can
and
be
there's
hard to
maybe
move forward.
another example I can give. It's not a success story yet, but it is a success story in my opinion because of the grit demonstrated by this founding team, right? So they are looking to disrupt an industry where you need a lot of grant funding. It's super early, and to kind of raise diluted capital, they would need to really win some of these large grants. And it's not often, or most often, grant funding will not let you use the proceeds for commercial activities. And so we came in as the only institutional investor, put a round together, helped them raise that early funding. And as so often happens, especially in these kind of polarized political times, the grant funding is delayed. right? So they are not on track to, hit their milestones. But what has really impressed me about this team is they have actually gotten gigs or contracting jobs where they are earning salaries to fund the company and to keep the lights on, which I think it's very rare to see something like that. So no, it's not a success in terms of, is our investment at a higher value today? But I think their dedication to making it work and making sure that the faith that investors put them at the earliest stages was right. I think that is for me is a great success story.
That's awesome. And you guys you're getting enough deals out there to have those success stories. It's really fun. So you said 50 deals here by the end of Q2.
That's right.
That's let's see, what is that? That's been a year and a half roughly.
Yeah, thereabouts.
So we're talking. That's I'm gonna get this wrong. That's better than 2 deals a month.
Yeah.
Wow, that's quite impressive.
Yeah.
Well, there's one more thing we wanted to leave a little bit of time for, Prem, and that was I know companies often have trouble raising funds at different stages. One of those things is sometimes they're like trying to get, be it equipment or other things like that. You guys have some novel takes on that. Not everything is just the standard pitch
Sure.
deck. Here's my great company, please fund it. You've got some cool other funding mechanisms in the back pocket there.
We do. One of the things we do is for companies that have B2B or business to government type of products. These are mostly for tangible products. We have a way to support those companies with PO financing. As early stage companies, they are not in a position to raise generally speaking, traditional bank financing. So we are able to work with those companies, assuming they have a purchase order, to help on the working capital side, right? So once the company is able to demonstrate that traction, that repeat business, then they become attractive for traditional, bank financing. And so we are a pipeline driver also for the banks who work with startups. But there's a gap in our ecosystem, and so there are some outfits that provide the type of financing, but oftentimes the interest levied is pretty high, and that becomes a challenge to grow the company. So we would rather the company put the margins they earn back into the company to grow the company versus paying high interest fees. So our interest rates are very, very company friendly. And this way, we let the company fulfill a purchase order. They pay us back, and then we are able to kind of repeat, after one turn, just put the money back and continue to fund their growth till they're at a point where they can easily access bank financing.
That's really fascinating. You said that has to be B2B, or there, I guess it would for a PO,
B2B,
for a PO to
B2G,
be issued.
yeah.
Yeah.
Preferably not preferably. We wouldn't do B2C because, like you said, there's no POs
Yeah.
in those situations.
But someplace where the company is writing a purchase order, and you can take that to the
Exactly.
bank because it's a legal contract, and now
Exactly.
you're giving them effectively a loan against the purchase price.
Exactly.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, we might have some introductions to make there. I think I know somebody who we've bumped
Absolutely.
into who could use that. So we'll make those introductions. This is all about is making connections. So
Exactly. It's a village, right? So
it takes a village. No, that's great. Well, let's see. We're coming up near the top of the hour here, Prem. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. I think we've got a much better picture of where you fit in the ecosystem, what kinds of things are available. You guys are trucking through deals, which is, congratulations on that. Great question from John in terms of what comes downstream and how you can help to align that. I'll go out to the audience one more time. If there are any questions you have for Prem, please feel free to bring them up now. Q&A, chat. Raise your hand, whatever is easiest for you. And also, I guess I'm wondering, Prem, what would you leave us with? I think a lot of us didn't know what was going to happen with COVID. Is the whole world going to come to an end? You launched a fund, so that's the ultimate statement of optimism, I think,
Right.
to go out there and get Rise
Yeah.
launched in the middle of that.
Yeah.
What should we be thinking about as we think about this world of early stage funding? What's your last word for us?
Um, I think um, something I think I said a little bit earlier is when a investor, you know, meets with you and then finds an investment opportunity is not ripe for that point in time, absorb that, take that feedback, demonstrate that you're able to kind of address the gaps, right? And then continue to stay in touch. It's, out of sight is out of mind often. And
Mm,
so you can maybe update, as long as an investor has credible reasons, right, for not investing at that point in time. I think kind of keeping that relationship warm, I think is super useful. We've done that several times where we may not have invested in an earlier round, but then the company has demonstrated their ability to execute, and then we've kind of invested in a follow-on round. The other one would perhaps be just, I think, the several investors and ourselves are just as crazy valuations, no product, crazy 40, 50 million valuation. And I think there is a correction happening, right? And just the realization that I think it's better to get the money in soon and actually demonstrate traction,
mm.
and then maybe raise more money at higher valuation. I think that would be, I think, maybe some of my feedback to founders. I think they're going to hear more no's if they kind of, without demonstrable traction, they want to raise a much higher valuation round than market, right? And the market is correcting itself, and those numbers are coming down. And so those are probably two things I'd leave the listeners with.
Yeah, great thoughts. I mean, it is all about story, 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 but you gotta take action on that story. Otherwise, people are looking for that. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
got to be able to take it across that finish line. Well, we're going to leave it there. Prem, I really appreciate your being with us. This has been such a great time together. Good to have you back on the show again. And it won't be the last time, and hopefully not another whole year and a half. But
Hopefully, yeah.
as always, a year disappeared somewhere in there, and we don't know where it
I
went.
know. I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, well, we always appreciate having you, and hopefully, I don't know if you'll have another 50 under your belt by then, but just keep cranking them
From your
out.
mouth to God's ears, Gene.
Okay, there we go. Prem Bodogala, Michigan Rise, Red Cedar Ventures. We appreciate having you on the show today.
Thank you. See you.
Well, and with that, we appreciate having you on the show today. This beautiful sunny afternoon. They're beautiful days out there. Hopefully, you're going to get out there and enjoy this weekend. If you have a question, comment, event coming up, anything, we'll take it now. Happy to let the audience know what's going on in the community, and you're welcome to raise a hand and mention anything that is on your mind. If you have companies that are looking for that sort of that mid-stage 100K to 250K with a match, but Rise can help you lead it. MichiganRise.com. You can get in touch with Prem and Jeff and the rest of the team there. And not seeing any questions or comments right now. We will see you next week. Patty Glaza will be with me in studio. We will be talking all things Invest Detroit. And I hope you have a wonderful week. Until then, bye-bye.